Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. It depends on the part of the world where you're joining us from today. Welcome to this very important event hosted by ESI Africa on green hydrogen and water connection in Africa. My name is Aisha Suleiman, and I'll be your moderator for today. Green hydrogen has been regarded as the fuel of the future, which would not only help us as a continent to decarbonize hard to abate sector, but it will also help us in our energy transition and access journey. And I'm very glad that Africa, our continent, is positioning herself as a leading hub in green hydrogen in the world. Now, green hydrogen, as you may all know or don't know, is produced via electrolysis of water using renewable energy electricity. Now, think about solar energy, think about wind, think about biomass. We're all blessed with this natural resource as a continent. But one key challenge sits at the center of it all, which is water. Does Africa have enough water resource to pursue her ambitious hydrogen economy? We'll find out in this webinar. Today, we're going to be asking the crucial question: how can Africa as a continent scale her hydrogen ambition reasonably and sustainably as water scarcity remains a pressing issue? I'm not just here by myself. I have two experts joining me today, and I'm going to bring them on to introduce themselves. Firstly, we have Shawn from South Africa, and we also have Dr. Zivayi from Namibia. So please kindly introduce yourself and particularly tell us how you found yourself in the hydrogen space.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to those joined in. As introduced by Aisha, thank you, Aisha. The name is Shawn Modise. I am the acting CEO at an entity called the Northern Cape Economic Development Trade Investment Promotion Agency, NCEDA in short, which is the helping hand. We hail here from South Africa in a province in the Northern Cape, where we've been sort of given the responsibility of advancing the Northern Cape Green Hydrogen Master Plan as well as strategy, which was issued in 2023 and 2024 respectively. For us, quite importantly, is really trying to look at how best to leverage on our natural endowments as provided by Aisha to decarbonize hard to abate sectors, looking at how best we'll be able to sort of infiltrate global sort of decarbonization agenda and making our various industries sort of ready in terms of the just transition process. And for us, it's quite critical that we do so in a sustainable way. So how we've embarked on this journey is really with the initial advent of the South African Renewable Energy Independent Power Producer Program, and that has been since enhanced to see how best we'll be able to even transport energy to the respective sort of using sort of areas, your industry decarbonization, looking at mobility, and then ultimately also the grid being decarbonized in a particular way. I think quite importantly here, it's about also enhancing the element of energy security. But at the forefront, when we have this conversation today, it's how we are going to really balance the equation by really appreciating how water security can also be part and parcel of the sustainable pathway that we're hoping to embark on. Thanks, Aisha.
You're welcome. Over to you, Dr. Zivayi.
Thank you very much. Greetings to all. My name is Zivayi Chiguvare, and I am currently the acting director of the Namibia Green Hydrogen Research Institute, which is a national institute hosted at the University of Namibia. How we came to green hydrogen is maybe, first of all, how I came to green hydrogen is I have been teaching physics and renewable energies before the year 2000. So in renewable energy, we taught also about storage of energy, which included hydrogen as an energy storage medium. But the new wave of green hydrogen started here in Namibia by the decision by the president then, His Excellency Hage Geingob, who is now late. And in the Harambee Prosperity Plan, which is a 5-year development plan of Namibia, they indicated the desire to develop the green and blue economy. Blue referring to the oceans and the skies, and the green referring to the renewable energies. And in that respect, they set up a Green Hydrogen Council, which was an interministerial council, which then reached out to universities and asked how could academia participate in the green hydrogen economic development that Namibian government wished to embark on. That's where we suggested that a green hydrogen research institute, which would look at all aspects before implementation, and including safety and technological, as well as social, economic, environmental, and so forth, should be looked at critically before we actually embark on what the nation was not aware and clear of. That's how we came to be in the green hydrogen. And then we set up the institute. It has been running now for the past 3 years. This is now the fourth year. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Zivayi and Shawn. It's a privilege to have your insight here today. So, to our audience, please feel free to listen attentively, pose your questions, comments in the comment section, and there will be a dedicated section of this event where we'll be attending to your questions. So, our speakers, thank you very much once again, and let's get right into the session. I'd like to start with Dr. Zivayi, seeing that you are from Namibia. And it would be wrong, in my opinion, to talk about the leading countries in Africa in terms of green hydrogen or hydrogen in general, and you don't mention Namibia in, let's say, the top five. It would be wrong. So, and knowing that Namibia is an arid country, in terms of water resources. So, how do you intend as a country to balance the water scarcity issue and also pursuing your hydrogen ambition as a country?
The interesting thing about Namibia is that it has got a long coastline where the ocean, the water from the ocean, from the Atlantic Ocean, is extremely dirty and salty. But we also have a lot of sunshine, in general, more than 300 days of cloudless skies with more than 5 kilowatt hours that can be harvested per square meter. And in this regard, we see big opportunities of utilizing the water from the ocean, desalinate it using renewable energy from the sun, and then clean it up using deionize it, and then use that water for electrolysis to make the hydrogen. So the water scarcity issue is actually covered by the vast amounts of water in the ocean. The only issue is to clean the water up, but cleaning is easy because we have already one of the largest desalination plants in Namibia, the Orano desalination plant, maybe in Southern Africa even, which has given Namibia the experience in desalinating seawater. We understand that the water scarcity issue is for the sweet water or for the potable water inland. So inland, we have a pilot project that we have worked on, which is referred to as the Green Hydrogen Village in the Daures constituency of the country, in the Erongo region of the country. And there we have drilled 6 boreholes, and all the water from the boreholes is extremely salty. If you taste it, you'll think you are taking seawater. Again, we are busy desalinating that water in the same manner that I have mentioned, and experience has actually shown that you can actually desalinate, use the same water for the water that you get for drinking and agricultural purposes. And this is something that can be done, but we are mainly for commercial purposes looking at the water from the ocean and desalinating that water. That's how we are addressing the water issue. Of course, there are issues. I have seen one short question. I was saying, how many kg do you get from 5 liters of water? It's we actually need 9.1 kilograms of water to get 1 kilogram, 1.1 kilogram of hydrogen. That's the clean water. From the ocean, we would have taken 3 times that amount of water and desalinated 2 liters or 2 kg basically would be the dirty water that is now extremely salty because it's concentrated, and the 1 liter, which is the 1 kg, is what goes into the production of hydrogen. And that's how we're addressing the water issue. Like I said, we're getting it from the ocean and desalinating it.
Thank you very much, Dr. Zivayi. It's
Over to
very
you.
nice to see that Namibia is taking advantage of its location, being close, very close to the coastline. Also, to probably add on the question about the amount of water that will be required to produce. Now, I'm probably thinking that this person is saying, how can you use 9 liters of water to produce just 1 kilogram? Now, that 1 kilogram of hydrogen has 3 times more energy density than, even gasoline. So imagine what gasoline could do for you. 1 liter of gasoline could do for you in 2 hours. That same 1 liter of hydrogen could do that for you in probably 6 or 7 hours. So though we need a high amount of water to produce just 1 liter, but it could actually go way more than that for you. So let's go right to South Africa. We're coming to Northern Cape, Shawn. So tell us about the Bogobia cluster. What infrastructure and investments are actually being considered to ensure that there's a sustainable, water supply for hydrogen production?
No, 100%. Thank you so much for the question, Aisha. I think similar characteristics as Namibia, we also have a tremendous coastline in the province, about 330 kilometers thereof. We have the mighty Orange River, which actually separates the two countries. But we've somewhat agreed that on the basis of the scale of the development in terms of the cluster, the project recognizes that there's a critical importance around how we're going to sort of leverage on a water feedstock. That's why, from a sustainability pathway, we are also considering looking at investments into large desalination sort of plants, which will be extracting seawater from the Atlantic Ocean, because, like I've mentioned, similar conditions to your Namibia. But the ultimate end, in terms of how we've been facilitating this, we are currently running a strategic environmental assessment to really gauge how the net effect of the type of infrastructure that will be deployed within the production area is going to look and feel like. And it considers these desalination sort of facilities. The ultimate element that we're really considering is that with our private sector actors that are locating within the proposed Bohubhai Special Economic Zone, is that they need to look at potential oversizing of these desalination facilities. And this will, by and large, be considering also being able to create access water for the surrounding communities. And it's been done intentionally so because we know that the province in itself is also an arid province, similar conditions as Namibia. And we have an element of water security that we need to really try and preserve and protect at all times. So forward thinking in terms of the infrastructure investment, we're looking at enabling surplus potable water for the surrounding areas for consumption, as well as enabling some of the other activities from a food production perspective, because a lot of the people in the area are also subsistence farmers in a way. And this will include the Richtersveld in total in terms of the local municipal area, which includes the two prominent towns, which is Alexander Bay as well as Port Nolloth. And we intend also interfacing with the municipality to strengthen the bulk infrastructure capability, which will feed from this desalination plants to ensure that there's sufficiency of water for the production of hydrogen. Because what we do know is that you don't use all the water for the production, but it's predominantly for the cooling that will be sort of the bulk consumer in this instance. And under the right conditions, you would want to make sure that you have sufficiency of that water circulating in a closed loop, and then ultimately leveraging of the required sort of feedstock from the sea being then desalinated and demineralized for the production of of hydrogen. We want to make sure that we also comply with regulatory standards, because ultimately the positioning of Bohubay is to evacuate about 70% of what is produced into the global market. So the element of sustainability, alignment with your ISC standards, so that the very molecule that is produced is then certifiable. But as mentioned, everything is being done so that we move from a sustainability pathway. And what we're also considering is the issue of brine treatment without having to really have a massive impact, which is currently also being considered as part of the strategic environmental assessment on what would be the best sort of routes to take in terms of solution options to be able to not affect the marine ecology in the best in the way that if you just discharge back into the sea, it will ultimately affect the marine area. So ultimately, what we're hoping to get through is have a solution option that has minimal to no impact, if you like, in terms of the marine side, and have sustainability pathways in terms of making sure that the area is comprehensively catered for in terms of water, while we produce the green molecule, as it were, which will enable us to sort of decarbonize key sectors within the Northern Cape Industrial Corridor.
That was very comprehensive, Shawn. Thank you very much. It's actually interesting to know that you're taking intentional steps to ensure that everything goes very well. So, moving to Dr. Zivayi quickly in 2 minutes. You're in the private sector, so I want to get your thoughts on, if companies are taking the water risk issue as very intentional, or it's still something that is just like an afterthought.
No, it's not being taken as an afterthought because it's the main raw material from which the hydrogen comes. And like I mentioned, the issue of using potable water from within the country is almost out of question. And we are looking only at mainly for the commercial purposes. We are looking mainly at seawater. And the companies, private sector companies that are in Namibia at the moment who wish to actually develop green hydrogen projects, they are almost all of them basically located along the coastline. And maybe you might know that Namibia has a green hydrogen strategy, in which it has divided the country into three valleys, where the valleys are in the south, central, and northern parts of Namibia along the coast. And most projects at the moment are in the central region. The one in the southern region, which is the largest, done by Hyphen private company, would wish to export in the range of 300,000 tons of hydrogen per annum when fully operational. And they have been looking at this issue of water, even like Shawn had just mentioned. We are looking at how to manage brine. And if you look closely behind me, you will see some containers with some water and so forth. This is water from the Daures, and I could just do this.
I think we
Studying what elements are in there, studying how to extract certain elements with the idea of actually mining from brine, mining essential elements like magnesium, chlorine, sodium, calcite, and so forth from brine. We've been doing experiments in this regards so that we see how this can be scaled up so that the brine that seems to be a nuisance can actually become a resource. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Before I go to Shawn, I just want to quickly, remind our audience that keep sending in your question, weigh in your thoughts on this conversation. And also, if you want to learn more about ESI's work, feel free to go to their website. And if you want to download the recent hydrogen report, which has been published by ESI, you would see a QR code which would appear on your screen now or very shortly, which you can use to access the report. Now, going to you, Shawn, you are working with investors, right? Because you mentioned you work in the Buguba cluster and like that. So how do you balance, investors' excitement, because green hydrogen projects are usually like a big deal. So I can understand if investors are being excited to invest in green hydrogen projects. So how do you balance investors' excitement to ensure that the project does not come at the cost of the comfortability of the local community which this project are actually being hosted?
My humble apologies, my mic was muted. I started going off. Thanks for that question, Aisha. I think maybe just to contextualize this for the audience, where Bohubai lands itself, it's really within the context of a landmass that is owned by the Richtersveld Communal Property Association. They are the rightful owners of this particular area. So we've been collaborating quite closely with this key community as they hold the key to really unlocking our net potential in the province. Our approach is always to be operating from a space of co-benefit outcomes. So from the onset, we looked at Bohubai and understood that we have to integrate community resilience as well as equity into how we then plan for the sort of infrastructure build program. Ultimately, we have to engage with the landlord in this instance, being the community at large. It's about 4,000 people that are in ownership of this particular key piece of land that is enabling the Northern Cape to leverage its broader natural endowments within the Namakwa district in total. And as we've been journeying together with the communities, we've been also introducing the various investors, if you like. So as mentioned, our anchor, perhaps this was before we actually started the call, our anchor investor that initiated the body of work was Sasol. They've since concluded their pre-feasibility study. That was about a year ago, and went to market to look at additionality of investors to sort of cater for the broader ecosystem elements. And consistently, we had ensured that we communicate with the communities in terms of how this is going to look and feel like. We've given an indication that we won't be affecting or won't be utilizing water from the Orange River because by and large, that has been utilized for subsistence farming as well as other related, if you like, food security elements, as well as just consumption for the respective communities. But we've indicated the way in which this infrastructure build program is going to be facilitated was going to be then dealt with from a desalination perspective. And this is going to then enhance the sort of water security for the area. As mentioned, this area is relatively large. I think the Richtersveld Community Property Association owns about 240 to 50,000 hectares of land, and there are far-flung sort of communities that you'll find there. So the way in which the build program from an infrastructure perspective is considered is how do we then also enhance on issues of water security, reducing the cost of water, because we know that this feedstock, if you have to just look at it from people consuming it, it becomes relatively expensive. I don't want to say that water, if you'd want to know that water in the Northern Cape is a bit more expensive than you'll find there in Sandton, which is the richest square mile in Africa at the moment. So it doesn't make sense for many when we say that. So in this instance, what we're trying to do is make sure that we sort of create the equalized solution option that does not take away the element of having a sustainable solution for water security that amplifies what we have in the Orange River. We also note that water schemes from a river perspective are sort of fluctuating on the basis of the climate itself, and this is part and parcel of our response to ensuring that a climate neutral sort of pathway in relation to infrastructure build programs to enable a hydrogen economy is then deployed. And for us, it becomes quite key that we safeguard our current existing water supplies to community and then enhance it with the reliance of desalinated water. This is something that is going to be non-extractive, if you like, because ultimately what we're hoping to do is be able to balance the equation and understanding with technology advancements the best solution option that will be able to give us water security for the entire Richtersveld area. And this will predominantly be powered by renewable energy, because when you look at the ecosystem, as it were, and how we're creating it as part of the solution for the Bokubai cluster to come to stream, and this is something that we have agreed on with various investors, that it needs to be done in such a way that it reduces the cost of local livelihoods in terms of cost of living, and they are part and parcel of that solution. So the way we're structuring it is that you oversize the water, you oversize the renewables, and this then becomes a differential to reducing the element of expenses to the local communities. But in this instance as well, if you think about it, the way in which we structured our special economic zone is that there will be also certain elements of equity, because the landowners is the community. So we have this partnership that is being created in a way that will amplify sort of the localization pathways as part of the resolve. Thanks, Aisha.
Thank you so much, Shawn, for yet another very detailed response. You know, again, I would like to say that I'm glad to see that, steps are being taken to ensure that these communities are actually protected. We've had cases where projects are being implemented in community energy projects, particularly, and the community are not well compensated or not even, put into the entire plan. So I want to come to Dr. Zivayi from Namibia perspective. Would you, for the purpose of the audience, share pilot project or mega project or even studies that in Namibia that have demonstrated, you know, green hydrogen production, how it can be balanced with the water stewardship?
Thank you, Aisha. Uh, Perhaps I will start with the pilot projects and just highlight which ones are actually uh, operational now. Perhaps for the audience sake, you might know that the German government and Namibian government went into an agreement, a partnership agreement to develop green hydrogen together. And the German government made available some funds to kickstart the green hydrogen projects in Namibia in terms of pilot projects. And the two pilot projects that were funded in this regard are the first one, the Daures Green Hydrogen Village, which is a self-sustained village from energy production to water abstraction from underground to changing that water, desalinating that water and cleaning it up, and using that water for drinking purposes and also for agricultural purposes. We now have 2 hectares under shade or shade nets where agriculture in terms of hydroponics is now being done in the middle of the desert. When I say in the middle of the desert, maybe some people might not have a good picture of what I'm talking about. We are talking of a place that is 60 kilometers away from the nearest human habited areas, where it's really far away. And there has also been an issue of do not disturb the protected areas. So from the coast going inland after Hentis Bay and Cape Cross, we go about 70 kilometers inland, so that we live and get out of the Dorob National Park. And then that's where the village is stationed. Before then, when we went there and we were told this is where we are going to build the village, everybody thought people were crazy. Their minds were not in the right state of mind. But when you visit that place now, it's almost become a tourist attraction because people go there to see how technology and will can transform a lifeless place into life. And people from Walvis Bay, Hentis Bay, and Swakopmund are actually benefiting from eating cucumbers, green pepper, and tomatoes that are coming from that plant, from those 2 hectares that I've mentioned. It's a highly productive place, and utilizing the water from underground, cleaning it up. And at the moment, like I mentioned, we have been involved in the research to see what to do with the brine. And we are seeing that calcite, magnesium are some of the elements that we can actually work on extracting before. And when those are extracted, the water can actually become also useful for animal consumption, though at the moment there are no animals thought of as breeding animals. There is not an idea at the moment, but now you find birds flying coming to drink the water. So actually you have to put pools of water, of clean water, not the salty water, which are open where birds can come and drink, and also animals from the, well, from the forest, from the desert, can come and drink once in a while. In the past, you wouldn't see any flying or crawling insect or animal in that area. So that's one project. Then the other project is the green hydrogen refueling station that has been set up at Welvis Bay. The idea of that one is ultimately to extract also water from the uh, ocean, and they've already started. Perhaps in the water section, I should mention. I think I had mentioned before that we have one of the largest desalination plants in the southern African regions, and that water, the water that is feeding Yentis Bay and Swakopmund as well as this bay, is actually coming from that desalination plant. Again, in support of what Shawn was saying, the desalination plants actually are a source of water for drinking and agricultural purposes where there would otherwise be no such water. So, in that regard, these are actually useful for the communities in that regard. Then we have a third pilot project that just been inaugurated, where the idea is to uh, harvest green hydrogen and use it to reduce iron to make steel. And this has already been established. And the idea is to utilize resources that are locally available and utilize them in the production of iron. This company is called High Iron. Perhaps I should mention that the Daures village has no idea of exporting hydrogen at this moment. Its main idea is to actually transform the hydrogen, combine it with nitrogen to form ammonia, and utilize sulfuric acid that comes from a copper smelter also located here in Namibia to react them to make ammonium sulfate fertilizer, so that this can also benefit both the local community at Daures Green Hydrogen Village and the surroundings. But perhaps if this works well, perhaps a fertilizer production line can actually be developed, which can perhaps alleviate the issue of importing 100% fertilizer into the country, as is the state at the moment. And possibly, who knows, we might end up exporting fertilizers also to the region. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Zivayi. For my own personal comments, I'm very happy to see that, particularly this Daures village. I haven't been to Namibia, but I've seen pictures and videos of this place, and it's an amazing sight to behold. So, for our audience, if you're anywhere in Namibia and you probably have time, I think you should make your way to Daures village to see the amazing, facility that is being held there. And it's also great to see that the fertilizers that are being produced from this Taurus village is going to be used locally first, and then there's conversation about potential exports. Yeah, we should be able to benefit from resources that we are producing as a continent, before thinking about taking it outside either of the continent or in the country. So moving on to Shawn, I want to ask questions about, South Africa, between economic development and planning and water resource management at the national or provincial level, what kind of coordination are you seeing that is happening around these two, like hydrogen and water? What kind of coordination do you see happening in South Africa?
No, 100%. Thank you, Aisha. I think, in South Africa, we've since actually traversed a whole chord of reimagining how we can then leverage off this particular economy from a country investment strategy. It was earmarked as one of the big frontiers. So there has been impetus from the level of the presidency where JET office was put in place, and subsequently a JET PMU that was in this year established within the Industrial Development Corporation to advance and create that sort of horizontal and vertical integrated collaboration from an intergovernmental perspective. I think quite pertinently, we've noted that when you look at the ecosystem in total, it requires multiple governmental sort of participation. So it is anchored at a national level within those two structures that I've mentioned. And subsequently, they report into an interministerial committee that looks at all of the feedstock elements. And like you rightfully indicated, key departments at a national level, and this is a national competency in South Africa, being the water and sanitation function, the DWS. So we've got a national sort of representation that looks and takes care of the element of water security, and how that is then dovetail in terms of the economic potential and opportunity is being iterated in a number of documents that are strategic in terms of our hydrogen journey. To start off, we embedded all of this in terms of the Hydrogen Society roadmap that looked at various sort of key nodes and sort of areas that will have the development ambition of producing hydrogen, obviously leveraging off what we have as existing industrial capacity and new growth points like the Northern Cape in this instance. That's why we went and advanced in developing a sort of de-escalated version of a hydrogen society roadmap in the form of a green hydrogen strategy that is cross-sectoral in terms of planning how infrastructure, both from a water and energy perspective, need to be sort of facilitated. And quite pertinently, here in the province, they then identified our institution as the implementing arm that will then coordinate from a strategic integrated program perspective. So we have existing structures that have emphatic conversations around how best we will be able to move on issues relating to all of the requirements to be able to produce this very molecule and ultimately understand the net effects in terms of that. And then all of these are being coordinated. As mentioned, there's this horizontal integration in terms of government at a provincial level and then the verticals to the national. We also don't lose sight of the importance of the coalface being the local government sort of body of government in this instance, where spatially all of these projects really are located. So we make sure that there's key emphasis being placed on how these respective key elements from a water as well as energy perspective are being embedded into the independent or integrated development plans of municipalities, and those then resonate in terms of the upward escalation to key areas for catchment strategies that are being then sort of developed. And this is part and parcel of the conversations with the Department of Water and Sanitation, because as we know, water is life and it becomes important that we preserve. And consistently, we look at various ways in which we will have long-term sort of spatial as well as environmental mechanisms that enable planning. And this is universally being like there's conversations around it in terms of how we then coordinate. So at a provincial level, there are structures. At the local government level, there are structures. And then ultimately at the national level, where all policy sort of instruments will be then leveraged is quite important. I did give an indication that we are currently looking at a strategic environmental assessment element. And all of this really brings into play a very transparent process in terms of how the sustainability pathway is going to be then facilitated. And this is being done under the auspices of the IFC global standards in terms of environmental sustainability and management perspective, and is being coordinated by the province. So there's the verticals as well as the horizontals, which ensures that everyone is then abreast in terms of how this particular economy will be developed. Thanks, Aisha.
Thank you very much. My next question would be going to, maybe I just start from you, but I also like to get your thoughts, Dr. Zivayi, on these questions as well. So, in terms of, let's step out of Africa a bit. Let's talk about project, or maybe Africa and the world at large. So, if you're giving example of countries of projects in Africa, then you can weigh in on what other countries can learn on the continent. But if you're giving example of projects globally, then maybe you say what we can learn as a continent. So are they, give us example of hydrogen projects that have demonstrated responsible water use either on the continent or out of the continent, and what can we as a continent learn from it if you're giving example of a global project, or what can other countries in the continent learn from it if you're giving example of a country in the continent.
Sorry, I thought the question was going to Shawn first, but anyway, I can respond. Yes.
Yeah, you can respond and then I'll get his thoughts also as well. Yeah.
All right. Thank you. The issue is hydrogen has not been produced at the levels and the quantities that are now being thought of. Hydrogen has been used the world over, but produced from fossil fuels. And now the way of producing hydrogen that is required, which requires water, at the scales that we are talking about, is still new to the world. Countries that are thinking of making hydrogen in large quantities include Namibia, Chile, possibly Egypt, Morocco, no, not Egypt, Morocco, and I've heard Portugal also, and I think some countries in the Middle East. But in general, almost all these countries wish to utilize water from the oceans. When we think of water from the oceans and we think of responsible use of that water and responsible use or responsible disposal of the brine, there have been issues that have been raised, for example, in the Mediterranean Ocean, where there's a lot of desalination of seawater and disposition of brine in the water. There have been reports of high concentrations of salinity in certain areas disturbing marine environment. And in our case, like I mentioned before, we are busy working on the possibility of utilizing the water that is supposed to be considered as a waste or a nuisance, which is the brine, to actually extract minerals from it, establish ventures that mine from the water. So where else have people mined from seawater or from brine? I can give you a simple example of Japan. They mine their uranium from their ocean, from the seawater, for their nuclear power plants. And there are several other countries that are doing this, or mining. In Namibia, it's not quite like mining, that the salt that we eat in our homes, the sodium chloride, is just the biggest quantity that is in the salt of the oceans. And we already have many salt pans that are actually mining or getting water, and just through evaporation pans, getting this water into crystallized salt that is sold inland as far as Botswana, Zambia, Zimbabwe, for cattle to those cattle like salt and they eat the salt. So we are thinking, when we remove certain chemicals from it, that remaining salt can still be utilized for animal consumption, and the water can be refed actually to the desalination plant, where it will make the desalination, how do you call it, the desalination, or let's say the reverse osmosis filters last longer, because they are now getting less dirty water, and this water can always be recycled again back to producing the hydrogen or back to agriculture. So in this regard, I am not able to give you examples of massive hydrogen production from electrolysis of water in Africa, because I do not know whether they exist at the moment. But I hear that Morocco is venturing also into production of green hydrogen, but I'm not so sure of the scales. I would not want to preempt or to assume and give a wrong figure. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Zivayi. One thing that I picked up from everything that you've said is that even in the hydrogen economy, circular economy exists. So there's no waste of water resources or any of the product. Shawn, do you want to quickly weigh in on this or move on
No,
to the next?
100%. I was relishing the chance. Actually, I was just thinking about the element that if I had to give an example, obviously I would speak about my neighbor as well, because we've got similar ambitions in terms of the long-term scenarios. But if you look at the global sort of perspective, your Australian green hydrogen development hubs, as well as Chile in the Atacama Desert, all of these are also looking at large-scale renewable desalination, because as mentioned previously, all of these projects would require tremendous volumes of water, and there's elements of integrated reuse or desalination, or even the type of pathways that will include securing the social and environmental license to operate, meaning that you will want to integrate a solution option that diversifies the area that is currently been struggling with water supply. And how best can you do that by introducing this desalination technology? Just in terms of that, I think there was also a question in the chat where a question around the issue of discharge. It's an issue of the type of technology that you would deploy, if you like, in terms of the electrolysis process. Which electrolyzer would you use? I know for PEM as well as alkaline, it goes into about 40 to 80 degrees Celsius in terms of heat if you're going to discharge it back. But like Doc has provided, I think a lot of the developers are looking at how best do we create this circular economic opportunities in terms of desalinated water. The models always show that with upfront planning and appropriate technologies, you could have this as a low-hanging fruit for community inclusion. So as much as many producers are looking at enhancing the production of hydrogen, we want to see how can we look at circular economic opportunities that will benefit the locals in the area that are not per se hydrogen producers, but want to be part and parcel of the development trajectory of the respective projects. So the issue of brine management and technologies that reduce the impacts of the marine ecology as well as the ecosystem impacts is something that we have considered quite greatly in Bukubai. And this also provides an opportunity for local businesses looking at how best to be able to repurpose brine as a key feedstock into other industries. I think it's quite interesting in the European market. There's also an opportunity to utilize the brine or treated brine in a particular way that you'll then be able to generate chlorine that it becomes something that they use to smoothen out the roads when it's snowing in the EU. So it becomes quite an interesting sort of circular economic opportunity. And then obviously there's the chemical uses that you can also apply. So for us, quite importantly, it's how do you see creating longevity of sustainable development pathways in terms of the solution options that are considered. And we're working quite closely with our developers and learning from these various projects across the globe on how best to sort of take this forward. Thanks, Aisha.
You're welcome. That was a very comprehensive response. Yes, again. So I would move to Dr. Zivayi just to get your final thoughts and a form of like a wrap up. So Namibia is advancing in green hydrogen, and I also like to get your thoughts on this as well, Shawn, because South Africa is also advancing in green hydrogen. What's if you could offer just one key message in 1 minute to other African countries who are already scaling green hydrogen or have plans to scale green hydrogen, what must they get right in terms of the water resource or any other advice that you could give to other African countries scaling green hydrogen or have plans to scale green hydrogen?
All right. So perhaps if did you say I must go first, Aisha? I just want to check.
Um, Dr. Ziva, you can go first, or
All right, no, that's fine. I can go first still. Uh, the interesting thing about water is we need it in our daily lives. And in a desert country like Namibia, the water for drinking and agriculture is scarce. We don't have the water. And desalination and these big uh, green hydrogen plants, which will put big desalination plants, actually provide an opportunity to now avail water that was not there before for use by human beings, their agriculture in terms of animals and crops. And we see this as a big plus in terms of societal development. We are looking at Namibia as a country that is, I don't want to call it developing, I want to call it underdeveloped. And underdeveloped countries, which are in the same range as Namibia, might actually get a chance to industrialize a bit by utilizing some of the hydrogen that they produce to produce some goods that are finished within their own countries. Currently, Namibia imports, like you might know, electricity that we import from South Africa is like in the range of 70% per year. And we are now looking at companies that want to utilize the water from the ocean, desalinate it, produce hydrogen, and from oversized photovoltaic plants, produce baseload power to be imported into the grid of Namibia from the Namibian land. And hopefully, with time, export also the electricity to the Southern African power pool. So, to countries that want to go hydrogen and to go for it in a big way, do not look at hydrogen only as the end product. Look at the whole value chain and what it brings to the nation, including water that is now available, which was not there before. Let's not just think of utilizing already available fresh water because we do not have it, for example, in Namibia. Thank you.
thank you very
Thanks,
much,
Aisha.
Shawn. Just yeah, get your
Thanks,
thoughts in
Aisha.
1 minute or
I
less.
think I think mine, by and large, is my confidence lies in three pillars, if you like, in terms of how we are going to be sort of facilitating this from South African and Northern Cape perspective. First and foremost, having resource conscious designs. We are not using scarce fresh water from sources like the river. Instead, we are focusing on how best we'll be able to leverage off seawater and creating sort of that circular economic opportunities as provided, as well as ensure that it meets both the production facility requirements and that of the community. Secondly, is the element of integrated planning and considering social benefit as well as compact. This is something that is quite tremendous, and I've sort of overemphasized on the fact that we, as a investment promotion agency, when we engage and facilitate with our key investors, we put it to them that we need to oversize on the desalination facility as well as the renewables as a deliberate move to ensure that we have long-term water and energy security for our communities, as well as the appreciation of the fact that these areas, in most instances, are historically underserviced or underserved, if you like. And I think I speak from a province that is a province that was birthed with the new democratic dispensation in South Africa. And this is something that we need to make sure it becomes sort of the realities going forward for all of us collectively. And then the third element is just the issue around government and policy alignment with strong support from both province and national leadership. We are looking at existing infrastructure as well as key policy frameworks that will enable how we want to really position the Northern Cape as a lead in terms of aggregation of green hydrogen within the context of South Africa. But I must indicate that we're also looking at the regionalistic perspective, because we believe in unlocking the SADC corridor in total and ensuring that it integrates, like Doc has put it, into the whole Southern Africa power pool. But obviously, all of this needs to be done in a just and climate smart way, which ensures that water resilience and sustainability is part of the cornerstone to how we're going to then industrialize our respective areas. But ultimately, this is a very key element, and we hold it true to how we sort of embed it into our development trajectory and ensure that these three core elements are part and parcel of how we progress. Thanks, Aisha.
Welcome. Thank you very much for your response. We are almost wrapping up in less than 5 minutes. Please, to our audience, feel free to scan the QR code on your screen to download the Hydrogen Insight volume, and also catch up on other webinar series that have been organized by ESI Africa. So to wrap up, first, I would like to thank our amazing speakers who have taken our time to join us today and share their expertise, from their different fields from Namibia and South Africa. Personally, I have learned a lot about how Namibia is, using their own advantage of being along the coastline to tap into their hydrogen economy. It actually shows that other countries can look inwards to see what is their competitive advantage, if at all they are having plans to advance their hydrogen economy. It's also great to learn about the Bokobea cluster and the Dares village project in Namibia, and how intentional, these countries are in terms of using this project to either produce fertilizers for use in the country and the continent, and also putting the communities which this project are being held into consideration, and not just taking resource from them without any compensation or something like that. Once again, thank you to our audience for joining this webinar on water connection and hydrogen. Please kindly note that this webinar will be available on demand at esi-africa.com, the website, the same one which you registered for this session with. You can also find the Hydrogen Insight volume on this website. So once again, thank you very much, everyone, for joining. Thank you to our speakers, and to our audience. Thank you very much for joining and also staying to the end. Feel free to share this webinar link with your colleagues, because there will be a replay, and also indulge people to download the Hydrogen Insight, and we can always keep the conversation going. Thank you very much once again, everyone, and do have an amazing day and weekend.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity.